The emergency lights cast red shadows across the Galactic Council chamber as Ambassador Keth9 stood before the massive communication array. His 6 arms moved quickly over the controls, sending out the same desperate message he had transmitted. 57 times in the past week? Each time the response was the same: silence or worse. Polite refusals wrapped in diplomatic language. The Devourers had returned. For 1,000,000 years, they had slept in the dark spaces between galaxies there, mechanical bodies drifting like ancient tombstones. Now they were awake and they were hungry. 12 star systems had already fallen to their endless appetite. Entire civilizations, some older than most suns, had been consumed in a matter of days. The Devourers turned planets into fuel, stars into energy, and living beings into components. For their ever-growing network, Keth9 had watched the destruction through long-range sensors. The Balarian system, home to 3 billion crystal-based life forms, had simply vanished overnight. Where once there had been 7 planets and a bright, yellow star, now there was only empty space, and the faint energy signature of Devourer ships moving on to their next target. "Any responses from the Ashanti Federation?" asked Council Member Vel12, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. They had been in this chamber for 3 days straight, reaching out to every major power in the galaxy. "They sent a formal reply an hour ago," Keth9 replied, his voice hollow. "They expressed their sympathy for our situation but cannot spare any military assets. They are focusing on defending their own territory. And the crystalline hegemony? The same. They have pulled all their fleets back to their core worlds. They will not venture out to fight." The silence in the chamber was deafening. Around the circular table, representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned defeat. The Galactic Council had been formed 2,000 years ago to prevent exactly this kind of catastrophe. They had built trade networks, established peace treaties, and created the most advanced military force in known space. Yet when the real test came, they found themselves abandoned by their supposed allies. What about the psionic communes? Representative Zorthfor, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. They claim the Devourers are immune to mental attacks. Their mystics say the ancient machines have no consciousness to influence, no minds to control. They will not engage an enemy they cannot understand. Keth9 turned back to the communication array. The galaxy contained over 10,000 intelligent species, but most of them were too primitive to help, too distant to reach in time, or too weak to make a difference. The major powers had the strength to fight, but they lacked the will. They would rather hide behind their defenses and hope the Devourers would somehow grow tired of destruction. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation," suggested Council Member Yik7. "If we cannot stop them, maybe we can save some of our people." "Evacuate to where?" Keth9 asked. "The Devourers do not stop. They do not grow tired. They do not negotiate. They consume everything in their path until there is nothing left to consume. Running will only delay the inevitable." As he spoke, another alert flashed on his screen. The Morvanian system had just gone dark. 5 planets, 2 billion inhabitants, gone in the time it took to have this conversation. The Devourers were moving faster now, their efficiency improving with each world they consumed. Keth9 felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had been chosen as ambassador because of his skill in diplomacy, his ability to find common ground between different species. But what good were words when facing an enemy that did not listen? What was the point of negotiation when the other side wanted nothing but complete destruction? In desperation, he accessed the restricted database of uncontacted species. The files were marked with warnings about non-interference protocols, but protocols seemed meaningless when facing extinction. Most of the entries were for primitive civilizations that had not yet developed space travel. It would be no help against the Devourers. But one entry caught his attention. A young species called humans from a system designated Sol3. They had recently achieved faster-than-light travel, making first contact technically legal under emergency conditions. Their file was thin, containing only basic information gathered by long-range sensors. They appeared to be a relatively aggressive species, having fought numerous wars among themselves throughout their history. "What are you doing?" asked Vel 12. "Noticing his activity? Something that will probably get me expelled from the council," Keth 9 replied. "But since we may all be dead soon anyway, it seems worth the risk." He began composing a message to the humans. It was a simple plea for help, containing basic information about the Devourers and their location. He knew it was hopeless. Could a young species with limited technology possibly do against an enemy that had defeated civilizations millions of years older? But he had run out of options. The message was transmitted into the void, racing toward a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Keth 9 watched it disappear on his screen, knowing it was likely the last act of a dying civilization. The Devourers would reach Valorian space within 2 weeks. After that, there would be no one left to send messages. All they could do now was wait. The message from space arrived at Luna Station during the night shift, when most of Earth's military command was asleep. Lieutenant Park Juwan was monitoring deep space communications when her screen suddenly filled with an impossible signal. The transmission was clearly alien, coded in mathematics that took the base computers 3 hours to decode. What they found changed everything, Admiral. Lee Jisoo was awakened at 0300 hours by an urgent call from her communications officer. Stumbled to her command center, still in her sleeping clothes, expecting another routine report about asteroid mining operations or colony ship schedules. Instead, she found her entire night crew staring at screens filled with star charts, tactical data, and images of destruction on a scale she had never imagined. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Lieutenant Park said, her voice shaking. "We received a transmission from something called the Galactic Council. They're asking for help." Lee read the decoded message 3 times before its meaning sank in. Ancient machines had awakened and were destroying entire star systems. Billions of lives had already been lost. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years were being wiped out in a matter of days. Somehow this alien government was asking humanity for military assistance? "This has to be a joke," Lee muttered, "or some kind of test." But the mathematical proofs embedded in the message were too complex to fake. The star charts matched perfectly with Earth's long-range astronomical data. The energy signatures detected by their deep space sensors confirmed the presence of massive artificial objects moving between star systems. This was real. Within 6 hours, every major world leader was in an emergency video conference. The President of the United States, the Prime Minister of the European Federation, the Chairman of the Asian Alliance, and dozens of other officials filled the screens of the secure communication room. They all had the same question. What could Earth possibly do to help? "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said President Kim Dae-ho, rubbing his tired eyes. "These aliens are asking us to fight an enemy that has destroyed civilizations millions of years older than ours. With our current technology, we have maybe 20 combat-capable ships and weapons that would have been considered primitive 50 years ago." "That's correct, sir," Admiral Lee replied. "But I think we might be looking at this wrong. Maybe our weakness is actually our strength." The room fell silent. Defense Minister Choi Soon-hee leaned forward in her chair. "Explain." "Every species in this galaxy seems to have followed the same path," Lee continued. "They developed advanced technology, built powerful weapons, and created massive fleets. When they fight, they do it with overwhelming force and direct confrontation. But humanity is different. We've spent thousands of years fighting wars against enemies who had the same technology we did. We had to get creative." Colonel Park Taemin, Earth's top military strategist, nodded slowly. "The aliens are fighting these Devourers the same way they fight each other. Big ships, powerful weapons, head-to-head combat. But the Devourers are designed to counter exactly that kind of warfare. They absorb damaged ships and grow stronger." "So what are you suggesting?" asked the British Prime Minister. "We fight them the way we fought each other," Lee said. "Tactics they've never seen before. Guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, asymmetric strategies. Things that other species might consider dishonorable or ineffective." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Many leaders argued that getting involved was suicide. Earth's military was tiny compared to the galactic powers that had already refused to help. Their ships were slower, their weapons weaker, and their soldiers had never faced anything like the Devourers. But others pointed out that Earth had nothing to lose. If the Devourers were truly consuming everything in their path, they would eventually reach human space anyway, at least this way. They would be fighting alongside allies, instead of facing extinction alone. Commander Yu Sungyan, who had been quietly studying the tactical data, finally spoke up. I've been analyzing the Devourers' attack patterns. They're incredibly efficient, but they're also predictable. They follow the same strategy every time because it works against conventional military thinking. But what if we didn't fight conventionally? What? Do you mean, asked President Kim? Look at their resource-gathering operations, you said, pointing to the star charts? They send harvesting ships to strip planets of raw materials while their main fleet moves on to the next target. Those harvesting ships are lightly defended because no one has ever bothered to attack them. Everyone focuses on the main fleet. You're suggesting we hit their supply lines? Lee said, understanding immediately. We let other species engage their main forces while we slip in behind them and destroy their ability to replenish and grow. It's not glorious, but it might actually work. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, President Kim spoke. Admiral Lee, how quickly can you prepare a response fleet? You can have 12 ships ready to depart within 48 hours. She replied, It's not much, but it's all we have. Then do it. Send a message back to this Galactic Council. Tell them we're coming. As the conference ended and world leaders signed off one by one, Admiral Lee remained at her station, staring. At the alien message, she knew they were about to attempt something that would either save the galaxy or result in humanity's complete destruction. But for the first time in her career, she felt like they were about to fight a war that actually mattered. 3 days later, the first human fleet departed Earth's solar system, carrying with them the hopes of a species that had never backed down from a fight. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Valorian territory, 12 small ships against the backdrop of a dying star system. Admiral Lee Jasu stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching through the view screen as Ambassador Kethneen's vessel approached. The alien ship was 3 times larger than her flagship, its hull scarred by recent battle damage. Incoming transmission from the Valorian vessel, reported Lieutenant Seo Minyuk from his communications station. Put it through, Lee ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the 6-armed figure of Ambassador Kethnine. His alien features were difficult to read, but his posture spoke of exhaustion and desperation. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had watched his civilization crumble. Admiral Lee, I cannot express how grateful we are for your response. But I must ask, is this your entire fleet? Lee looked at her 12 ships. Each one smaller than the alien vessels she was speaking to. This is what we have available for immediate deployment. More ships are being prepared, but they won't arrive for several weeks. She watched as Kethneen's shoulders sagged. Even across the language barrier and species differences, disappointment was universal. The alien had been hoping for a miracle, and instead he got a handful of primitive ships commanded by a species that had barely left their own solar system. I understand your concern, Lee continued. But before you judge our capabilities, I'd like to review your tactical data on the Devourers. We may be able to help in ways you haven't considered. 2 hours later, Lee sat in the Valorian Command Center, surrounded by alien officers who watched her with mixtures of curiosity and pity. The holographic display showed the Devourers' recent attacks, their movements tracked across dozens of star systems. The pattern was clear and terrifying in its efficiency. They always attack the same way, explained Commander Vexit, a Valorian tactical officer. Their main fleet engages our defensive forces, while harvesting ships strip the planets of resources. We focus our fire on their largest vessels, but every ship we damage is simply absorbed into their network. They grow stronger with each battle. And you always meet them in direct combat? Lee asked. Of course. It is the honorable way to fight. We form battle lines, match their formations, and engage with our most powerful weapons. Lee studied the data for several minutes, her mind racing. The Devourers were indeed formidable opponents, but their tactics were predictable. They relied on conventional warfare because it had always worked against the galaxy's military forces. But what if someone fought them differently? Commander, I need to ask you something that might sound strange, Lee said. Have you ever considered not fighting their main fleet at all? The alien officers exchanged confused looks. Vexit tilted his head, a gesture that seemed to indicate puzzlement among his species. I do not understand. How does one fight a war without engaging the enemy's primary forces? By making those forces irrelevant, Lee replied. Show me the harvesting operations again. The display shifted to show Devourer harvesting ships, stripping a dead planet of its resources. The ships were large and efficient, but they were also isolated and relatively undefended. The main fleet had moved on to the next target, leaving the harvesters to work alone. These ships are the real enemy, Lee continued. The battle fleet is just a distraction. The Devourers need constant resources to maintain their network and build new units. Without their harvesters, they can't replace their losses or expand their forces. But attacking harvesting ships is... It's not how wars are fought, protested another Valorian officer. There is no honor in striking at support vessels while avoiding the main battle. Honor doesn't matter if your species is extinct, Lee said bluntly. We're not here to fight honorably. We're here to win. She turned to her own officers, who had been listening to the conversation with growing understanding. Commander Yu Sung-yan stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. We could use our stealth systems to approach the harvesting sites undetected, he suggested. Plant charges on their equipment, sabotage their operations, and disappear before they can respond. Exactly, Lee agreed. Let the Valorians keep the main fleet busy with conventional tactics. We'll slip in behind them and start cutting their supply lines. But your ships are so small, Keth9 said. How can you possibly damage vessels that size? We don't need to destroy them, Lee explained. We just need to make them useless. A few well-placed explosions in their harvesting equipment. Some computer viruses in their control systems, maybe even turn their own machinery against them. We've had to fight enemies with superior technology before. You learn to be creative. When you're outgunned, the first test of human tactics came 3 days later. A Devourer harvesting operation was detected in the ruins of the Keltharian system, slowly consuming what remained of 4 dead planets. The Valorian fleet moved to intercept the Devourer battle group, drawing them into the kind of frontal assault both sides expected. While the 2 fleets engaged in traditional combat, 3 human ships slipped past the battle using their stealth systems. Lieutenant Park Ji-won led the infiltration team, her small vessel approaching the harvesting ships from their blind spot. The Devourers had never needed to defend their support operations before. Their security was almost non-existent. The humans planted antimatter charges on the harvesting equipment. It introduced viruses into the computer systems and even managed to reprogram some of the automated systems to work against each other. By the time the Devourers detected the sabotage, the human ships were already gone. For the first time in months, the Devourers had actually lost resources instead of gaining them. The galaxy was about to learn a new way to fight. Human victory spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications. Within days, every major civilization had received detailed reports of how 12 primitive ships had accomplished what their massive fleets could not. The Devourers had actually lost resources for the first time since their awakening. Captain Choi Minky stood in the command center of the newly established coalition headquarters, watching as alien officers from dozens of species studied human tactical manuals. The translations were rough, but the concepts were clear enough. Terms like hit and run, supply line disruption, psychological warfare were being discussed in languages that had never needed such words before. I still do not understand this concept of retreat, said General Thax9 of the Ashanti Federation, his massive frame hunched over a tactical display. In our culture, warriors advance until victory or death. This idea of falling back to fight another day seems cowardly. It's not cowardly if it works, Minky replied patiently. She had been having this conversation with alien commanders for weeks now. Sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemy think they're winning while you prepare your real attack. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Jie entered the room carrying a datapad filled with the latest intelligence reports. Captain, we just received confirmation from the Balarian sector. The crystalline hegemony used our flanking maneuvers against a Devourer harvesting fleet. They destroyed 3 support ships and escaped without losses. And the psionic communes are having trouble with the stealth tactics, but their telepathic abilities are perfect for our intelligence-gathering operations. They can sense devourer movements from much greater distances than our sensors allow. Minky smiled. Each species was finding ways to adapt human tactics to their own strengths. The Ashanti had superior firepower, so they used human strike hand fade techniques to maximize damage while minimizing exposure. The crystallines had advanced sensors, making them excellent at coordinating multi-pronged attacks. Even the proud warrior cultures were beginning to see the value in fighting smart instead of fighting hard. The real breakthrough came when Lieutenant Siogina's engineering team made a discovery that changed everything. They had been studying captured devourer technology, trying to understand how the ancient machines converted organic matter into mechanical components. What they found was both horrifying and hopeful. The devourers don't just consume matter, Gina explained to the assembled command staff. They absorb information, technology, even tactical knowledge from every species they destroy. That's why they're so efficient at countering conventional warfare. They literally know how their enemies think. But that's also their weakness, added Chief Engineer Park Kyun-jin. If they absorb everything, including corrupted or false information, we can use that against them. The plan they developed was ambitious and dangerous. Instead of avoiding captured ships, they would intentionally allow certain vessels to be absorbed by the devourers. But these ships would be loaded with computer viruses, false tactical data, and programs designed to corrupt the devourer network from within. It's like a digital infection, Kyung-jin explained. The devourers think they're gaining our knowledge, but they're actually poisoning themselves with information designed to make them malfunction. The first test took place in the Morvanian sector, where a devourer fleet was systematically consuming the remains of a dead civilization. Coalition forces engaged them using standard tactics, deliberately allowing several ships to be captured and absorbed. The vessels contained months of carefully crafted misinformation about human capabilities and intentions. The results were immediate and dramatic. Devourer formations began making tactical errors, their coordination suffering as corrupted data spread through their network. Some units turned on each other, their targeting systems confused by false friend or foe identifications. Others became paralyzed by conflicting orders generated by the corrupted command structures. Within hours, the entire Devourer fleet was in chaos. Coalition forces moved in to finish off the disabled ships, achieving the first total victory against a major Devourer formation. The ancient machines, so efficient at absorbing and using enemy technology, become victims of their own success. News of the victory reached Earth just as Admiral Lee was preparing to return to the front lines with reinforcements. The message from Captain Choi was brief but triumphant. The tide has turned. The Devourers are retreating from multiple sectors. Request permission to begin pursuit operations. Lee read the message 3 times before the reality sank in. Humanity had not just helped fight the Devourers, they had taught the galaxy how to defeat them. Species that had existed for millions of years were learning warfare tactics from a civilization that had barely achieved interstellar travel. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity's greatest weakness, their violent history and constant warfare, had become their greatest strength. While other species had evolved beyond conflict, humans had perfected it. They understood deception, misdirection, and the psychological aspects of combat in ways that peaceful civilizations never could. As she prepared to join the pursuit of the retreating Devourers, Lee received a communication from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Keth9 appeared on her screen, but this time his posture was different. Instead of desperation, she saw something that looked like hope. Admiral Lee, the Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership and a permanent seat on the Strategic Defense Committee. Your species has given us something we had forgotten the knowledge. Sometimes peace can only be preserved through the wisdom of those who understand war. The galaxy would never be the same. We're still dangerous, but they were no longer unstoppable. In humanity, The young species that had answered when no one else would had earned its place among the stars. The last Devourer ship drifted silently through the void, its massive hull scarred and broken. Admiral Li Jusu watched from the bridge of the UES Indomitable as the ancient machine tried desperately to escape into dark space. Its engines flickered and died, victim to the same corrupted programming that had destroyed the rest of its fleet. "Shall we finish it off, Admiral?" asked Commander Yusunyan, his finger hovering over the weapons control. "No," Li replied. "Quietly let it go. One ship cannot rebuild what we've destroyed. And maybe someday other species will study it and learn from our mistakes." The Devourer ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying with it the remnants of a network that had once consumed entire civilizations. The war that had seemed hopeless just months ago was finally over. In the weeks that followed, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on the neutral world of Proxima Centauri for the largest diplomatic conference in galactic history. The old Galactic Council had been dissolved, its members having fled when the crisis began. Now, a new organization was being formed with humanity at its center. Captain Choi Minky stood in the main assembly hall, watching as delegates from hundreds of species debated the terms of what would become known as the Galactic Defense Alliance. The sight was overwhelming beings of every imaginable shape and size, from the crystalline hegemonians to the gaseous nebula commune, all united by their shared experience of near extinction. "The humans will have permanent seats on all military committees," announced Ambassador Keth9, who had been elected. As the conference chairman, their strategic command will oversee the training of all defensive forces. There were murmurs of agreement from the assembly. Even the proudest warrior races had learned to respect human military thinking. The Ashanti Federation, once dismissive of human capabilities, now sent their best officers to study at the newly established Human Military Academy on Luna. "But we must also address the question of Earth's status," continued Keth9. "They are among the youngest species here, yet they have contributed more to galactic security than civilizations millions of years older." The debate that followed was brief. Species that had once looked down on humanity now competed to offer them trade agreements, technology transfers, and colonial partnerships. The small blue planet that had once seemed so insignificant was now the most important world in the galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Ji found herself appointed as the first director of interspecies military exchange. Her office on Luna Station was constantly filled with alien officers eager to learn human tactics. The concepts that had once seemed alien to galactic thinking were now standard doctrine. "The key is to think like your enemy," she explained to a group of Valorian commanders, "not just their capabilities, but their psychology. What do they expect? What would surprise them? How can you make them defeat themselves?" These lessons were being taught on worlds throughout the galaxy. The Human Military Academy had established branch schools on 17 different planets, each one adapted to the specific needs and cultures of the local species. Combat techniques that had been developed in Earth's ancient wars were being refined and improved by alien military theorists. The most profound changes came to the children. On Earth, young people who had grown up hearing stories of humanity's struggle for acceptance in the galaxy now found themselves citizens of the most respected civilization in known space. Earth schools received thousands of applications from young aliens wanting to study human history and military theory. Park Tajan was 12 years old when he first met an alien classmate. Zik-7, a young crystalline, had come to Earth to study what his people called tactical creativity. The friendship that developed between them represented something new in galactic history, a generation that would grow up thinking of interspecies cooperation as natural and normal. "My grandfather says humans are the reason his world still exists," Zik-7 told Tajan during their lunch break. "He was a soldier in the final battles against the Devourers. Says your people taught us that sometimes the best way to protect something is to fight for it." These conversations were happening on thousands of worlds as the galaxy adapted to its new reality. The old divisions between species were breaking down, replaced by a shared understanding that survival required cooperation. The Devourers had been defeated, but their legacy was a galaxy united in ways that would have been impossible before the crisis. 5 years after the war's end, Admiral Lee stood once again in the command center of Luna Station. But now, instead of preparing for battle, she was overseeing the launch of the first truly integrated galactic fleet. Ships built by dozens of species, crewed by mixed teams of humans and aliens, equipped with technologies that combined the best innovations from across the galaxy. The exploration fleet is ready for departure, reported Captain Siogina, who had been promoted to head the new Deep Space Command. 50 ships, 37 different species, mission duration 5 years. Where are they headed? Lee asked. Beyond the galactic rim. There might be other civilizations out there that need help. And if there are other threats like the Devourers, we want to find them before they find us. Lee nodded approvingly. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the readiness to fight for what mattered. The young species that had once begged for acceptance among the stars was now leading them toward a future where no world would ever have to face extinction alone. The message that had begun this journey still echoed. Through space, they called for help, and no one answered. Till Earth did. Now, that would never happen again.